The maintenance corridors of Nova Station hummed with the steady pulse of machinery, a mechanical heartbeat that Taran Coleman had grown accustomed to over his 5 years as the station's senior repair technician. His boots echoed against metal grating as he made his way through the labyrinthine passages, tool belt heavy against his hip, the scent of oil and ozone clinging to his weathered jumpsuit. Nova Station hung at the edge of human space, a sprawling structure of interconnected modules and docking bays that served as a waypoint between Earth's colonies and the vast unknown. It was a place of transience, of comings and goings, of fortunes made and lost in the blink of an eye. And in the lower levels, where the station's gleaming facade gave way to rust and shadows, it was a place where the desperate came to disappear. Taran had finished his shift hours ago, but sleep eluded him as it often did. The nightmares were worse when he tried to rest, so he walked instead, letting the familiar corridors soothe his restless mind. It was during one of these midnight wanderings that he heard it, a soft, muffled sound that cut through the mechanical ambience. A child crying. He paused, turning his head to locate the source. The sound led him to a narrow maintenance alcove, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. There, huddled against a heating duct, was a small figure with iridescent blue skin that seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. A Novan child, no more than 7 by human standards, with wide, luminous eyes that reflected the scarce light like twin moons. "Are you lost?" Taran asked, crouching down to appear less intimidating. His voice was rough from disuse, but he tried to keep it gentle. The child shrank back, fear evident in her posture. Then, from the shadows behind her, a taller figure emerged. A woman, with the same shimmering blue skin but marked with intricate patterns that glowed faintly. Her features were sharp, almost avian, with eyes that held both wariness and defiance. "We're not lost," the woman said, her voice carrying an accent that made the standard language sound musical. "We're exactly where we need to be." Despite her proud words, Taran could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the slight tremor in her hands as she pulled the child closer. "This isn't a safe place to rest," Taran replied, gesturing to the corridor. "Security does sweeps, and they're not always kind to." He hesitated, searching for a diplomatic term. "To aliens," the woman finished for him, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "We're aware of human hospitality, thank you." Taran studied them more carefully. Their clothes were worn but clean, suggesting recent displacement rather than chronic homelessness. The child clutched a small, synthetic toy, the kind sold in the station's upper-level shops, another clue that their circumstances had changed suddenly. "I'm Taran," he offered, straightening up but keeping his distance. "Maintenance. Level 8. The woman hesitated, then replied, "I am Vela. This is my daughter, Lyri." Her voice softened as she spoke the child's name, her hand gently stroking the girl's head. "My husband," she faltered, "he left us here 3 days ago." The admission seemed to cost her something, her shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of the words. He was human, Taran guessed, and Vela's tight nod confirmed it. Mixed-species relationships were uncommon but not unheard of, particularly on frontier stations like Nova. And unfortunately, neither were stories of human partners abandoning their alien families when the novelty wore off or circumstances became difficult. Lyri looked up at her mother, then at Taran with wide, wondering eyes. "No one helps my mother," she said softly, her grasp of the language imperfect but clear. "She cries every night." The simple statement hit Taran with unexpected force. He was no humanitarian, life had stripped that idealism from him years ago. But something about the child's direct gaze, about the quiet dignity in Vela's exhausted stance, resonated with a part of himself he thought long buried. "I know somewhere safer," he heard himself saying. "If you'd like." Taran's quarters were modest but functional, a single room with a fold-out bed, compact kitchenette, and a small adjoining bathroom. It wasn't designed for 3, but it was secure, warm, and far from the prying eyes of station security. "It's temporary," Terran explained as he held the door open for Vela and Leary. "But it's better than the maintenance shafts." Vela hesitated at the threshold, her luminous eyes scanning every corner of the room as if searching for hidden threats. Leary, however, stepped inside without reservation, her natural curiosity overcoming her caution. "It smells like metal and flowers," the child observed, breathing deeply. Terran raised an eyebrow. "The flowers must be the cleaning solvent." "Not sure that's a compliment." A ghost of a smile flickered across Vela's face before vanishing. She finally stepped inside, her movements graceful despite her obvious exhaustion. "One night," she said firmly. "We will not impose further." Terran didn't argue. He busied himself preparing a simple meal from his limited supplies: synthetic protein cubes, hydrated vegetables, and purified water. As he worked, he noticed Leary watching him with fascination. "Do all humans have marks on their skin like you?" she asked, pointing to the intricate tattoo that covered his forearm, a stylized mechanical gear intertwined with what might have been flowers once, now faded and blurred with age. "No," Terran replied, setting 3 bowls on the small table. "These are tattoos. Choices, not born with them." He paused, glancing at the patterns on Vela's skin that pulsed gently with bioluminescence. "Unlike yours." Vela guided Leary to the table, her expression guarded. "Our markings tell our lineage. Our history." Her fingers traced the patterns on her daughter's smaller arm. "Leary bears both her father's and my patterns, though human DNA makes hers fainter." They ate in silence, the weight of unasked questions hanging between them. After the meal, Terran offered them his bed while he took the floor. Leary fell asleep almost instantly, her small body curled against her mother's side, but Vela remained alert, watching Terran through half-lidded eyes. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why help us when no one else would?" Terran stared at the ceiling, considering his answer. "I've seen what happens to people left in the cold on Nova Station," he said finally. "It's not pretty." "That is not a reason," Vela countered. "No," he admitted. "It's not." The conversation lapsed into silence, but something had shifted between them, a fragile bridge forming across the vast divide of their different worlds. Morning came too quickly. Terran rose before his guests, preparing for his shift. As he fastened his tool belt, Vela approached him, her expression resolute. "We need work," she stated simply. "I am skilled in biomechanical systems. On my homeworld, I was an environmental engineer." Terran nodded slowly. "Not many positions for aliens in upper levels, but there's always need for skilled hands in maintenance and hydroponics." He hesitated. "What about Leary?" Vela's gaze drifted to her sleeping daughter. "She is special. Even among our kind. It's partly why we left our world." Her voice dropped lower. "It's why her father wanted her. Not me. When he couldn't exploit her abilities as easily as he hoped, he abandoned us both." Terran felt a chill at the implication. "What abilities?" Before Vela could answer, an alert chimed on Terran's communicator, a priority maintenance call from level 3. He silenced it with a tap. "We'll talk later," he said, moving toward the door. "Stay here today. Food in the cabinet. Don't answer if anyone knocks." He paused, hand on the access panel. "I'll see what I can find out about work." As the door closed behind him, Terran wondered what he had gotten himself into. It was dangerous enough harboring unauthorized aliens on a human station, but if what Vela hinted at was true, Leary might be more than just a refugee child. She might be the reason her mother wept each night, not just for what they had lost, but for what others might still want to take from them. The hydroponics bay on level 5 was a rare splash of green amid Nova Station's metallic landscape. Here, under carefully calibrated lights, rows of plants thrived in nutrient-rich solutions, providing both food and oxygen for the station's inhabitants. Terran moved methodically through the bay, checking the irrigation systems while simultaneously scouting for potential work for Vela. The supervisor, Raza, was an older woman with a pragmatic outlook and a well-known disregard for bureaucracy. If anyone would hire an alien without asking too many questions, it would be her. Maintenance issues don't usually bring you to my door, Coleman, Raza noted, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. What's really on your mind? Terran adjusted a valve before responding. I know someone with experience in biomechanical systems. Environmental engineering. Human? He met her gaze steadily. Does it matter if the work gets done? Raza studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Bring them tomorrow. Early shift. We'll see what they can do. She turned to leave, then added, and Terran? Be careful. Station security's been cracking down. Something about a high-value fugitive. The warning followed him back to his quarters, where he found Vela poring over schematics on his data pad while Leary slept. The sight was so domestic, so ordinary, that it created a strange ache in his chest. You accessed station blueprints, he said, noting the display. That's restricted information. Vela didn't look up. Your security protocols are elementary. Her fingers traced a path on the screen. I was examining possible escape routes, should they become necessary. Terran set down his tools. You're not just running from a bad relationship, are you? Vela finally met his gaze, her luminous eyes unreadable. No more than you are running from mere nightmares. She gestured to the wall where he had unconsciously pressed his back during last night's episode, the silent screaming that had woken her. A standoff of secrets stretched between them until Terran broke first. I was a combat engineer. During the Frontier Wars. The admission came easier than expected. My unit was stationed on Helios colony when the reactor went critical. Official report said mechanical failure. It wasn't. You lost people, Vela observed quietly. Everyone, Terran confirmed. My wife. Our daughter. She was 4. The familiar numbness settled over him as he spoke of it. Found out later it was deliberate. Someone wanted that colony gone, and they didn't care who went with it. Vela's markings pulsed with a soft blue light, a response he couldn't interpret. Leary's father is a resource prospector named Gideon Walsh, she finally said. He came to our world claiming to study our ecosystem. Instead, he discovered that our children, specifically those with certain genetic markers, could sense mineral deposits. Extremely valuable ones, untraceable by conventional methods. She moved to Leary's side, her hand hovering protectively over the child. My daughter has the strongest sensitivity ever recorded. When she sleeps, she dreams of veins of rare elements running through worlds light years away. Gideon married me to gain access to her, to gain my people's trust. When regulations prevented him from exploiting her abilities directly, he stole her research data and abandoned us here. And now he's realized what he left behind, Terran concluded, remembering Raza's warning about security looking for fugitives. Vela nodded grimly. He will come for her. Not me. Terran crossed to the small window that overlooked the station's lower levels. In the distance, the lights of security drones moved in methodical patterns, searching. I got you work in hydroponics. Starting tomorrow. He turned back to face her. But we need a better plan than hiding in my quarters. Why are you doing this? Vela asked again, her voice containing both suspicion and vulnerability. You don't know us. Terran looked at Leary, seeing for a moment the shadow of his own daughter superimposed over the alien child. Maybe I'm tired of letting people disappear, he said simply. That night, as they prepared for sleep, the barriers between them began to dissolve. Terran showed Vela how to access emergency protocols on the station, while she explained the intricate meanings behind her bioluminescent patterns. They were from different worlds, shaped by different stars, yet the language of loss and resilience needed no translation. As Leary slept between them, Terran realized that something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer simply offering shelter to strangers. He was building something new from the ashes of his past, a purpose, if not yet a home. And somewhere on the station, security alerts flashed with increasing urgency as Gideon Walsh's ship requested emergency docking privileges. The hydroponics bay buzzed with activity as workers tended to the lush greenery that sustained Nova Station. Vela moved with natural grace among the plants, her blue fingers dancing over control panels with surprising precision. Terran observed from a distance, noting how Raza nodded with grudging approval at Vela's work. "Your friend knows her stuff," Raza commented when Terran approached. "Spotted issues with the nutrient cycling system that my techs missed for months." Terran allowed himself a small smile. "She has a gift. She also has station security interested in this section." Suddenly, Raza replied, her voice dropping. "2 patrols this morning already. That's not normal." A coldness settled in Terran's stomach. He'd left Leary hidden in his quarters, secure behind newly programmed locks, but how long would that protection last? "Thanks for the warning," he said, already turning to leave. The corridor outside hydroponics was unusually crowded. Terran recognized the distinct uniform of station security interspersed among the regular workers, not yet conducting searches, but establishing presence. Watching. Waiting. He made his way to a communication terminal, inputting a code that would send an alert to the data pad in his quarters, a signal for Leary to activate the emergency protocols he and Vela had prepared the night before. The child was remarkably intelligent, having memorized the complex sequence after just 2 demonstrations. "Technician Coleman." The voice froze him in place. Terran turned slowly to face a tall, well-dressed man flanked by 2 security officers. Though they had never met, Terran knew instantly who he was, the same confident stance, the same calculating gaze that Leary sometimes displayed when deep in thought. "Gideon Walsh," Terran acknowledged, his face carefully neutral. The man's expression flashed with surprise before settling into a practiced smile. "My reputation precedes me." "Good. That will make this conversation more efficient." He gestured toward a more private alcove. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. The security officers' hands rested pointedly on their weapons. "I understand you've made the acquaintance of my wife and daughter," Walsh said once they were relatively alone. "I'm grateful someone looked after them while I was delayed by business matters." "Abandoned," Terran corrected. "The word you're looking for is abandoned." Walsh's smile didn't waver. "A regrettable misunderstanding. I simply needed to secure certain patents before bringing them to more comfortable accommodations." He sighed dramatically. "Vela has always been emotional. Prone to overreaction. I'm sure she painted quite the tragic picture. She didn't have to paint anything. I found your family huddled in a maintenance shaft, starving." Something cold flickered in Walsh's eyes. "Family is precisely my concern, Coleman. I've come to reclaim mine." He stepped closer. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe," Terran replied. "With her mother in hydroponics?" Walsh raised an eyebrow at Terran's carefully controlled expression. "No." "Ah, hidden then." "Clever." He straightened his immaculate jacket. "I'll be direct. Leary possesses unique abilities valuable to both scientific research and commercial interests. Her genetic makeup is literally worth fortunes on multiple worlds." "She's a child, not a commodity," Terran growled. "She's my child," Walsh countered. "And while I appreciate your humanitarian concerns, this is a family matter." He gestured to the security officers. One that station authorities agree should be resolved by returning the child to her father. Terran glanced around, noticing more security personnel positioning themselves near the exits. They were boxing him in, separating him from both Vela and Leary. "You have until station curfew to bring my daughter to docking bay 7, Walsh continued smoothly. "After that, security will implement a level 3 sweep of all residential quarters. Anyone found harboring her will face serious consequences." He tilted his head, studying Terran. "You've suffered enough loss already, haven't you, Coleman? Don't add prison to that list." As Walsh and his entourage departed, Terran felt a familiar sensation creeping up his spine, the same cold calculation that had kept him alive during the war. He needed to warn Vela, needed to reach Leary before security did, needed a plan that wouldn't end with a child being exploited and a mother losing everything. Through the viewport near his position, Terran could see the vast emptiness of space beyond the station, beautiful, deadly, and utterly indifferent to the small dramas playing out within Nova's walls. Yet somewhere in that darkness was freedom, if they could reach it. Decision made, Terran activated his communicator and entered a code he had hoped never to use again, calling in a debt from the shadowy corners of his past. If they were going to escape, they would need help from those who specialized in disappearing. Time was running out, and the stars were watching. The maintenance corridors of Level 12 were rarely traveled, a labyrinth of narrow passages, exposed piping, and intermittent lighting that served as Nova Station's forgotten arteries. Here, amid the constant hum of life support systems, Terran led Vela and Leary through the darkness, guided by memory and desperation. "Security has sealed off all primary docking bays," Terran explained, checking his data pad for the latest station alerts. "Walsh has convinced them you kidnapped Leary, that you're unstable and dangerous." Vela's markings pulsed with anger, casting eerie blue shadows on the metal walls. "And they believe him without question?" "Human authority tends to believe human stories," Terran replied grimly, helping Leary over a section of raised flooring. The child had been silent since their hasty departure from his quarters, her wide eyes reflecting the gravity of their situation. They reached a junction where several passages converged. Terran pressed his palm against an unmarked section of wall, revealing a hidden panel that responded to his biometric signature. "Not everything on this station is in the official blueprints," he said as a concealed door slid open. Beyond lay a small, dimly lit chamber containing what appeared to be a modified escape pod, larger than standard issue, with custom navigation systems and reinforced hull plating. "A smuggler's vessel," Vela observed, her tone unreadable. Terran nodded. "From my less reputable days. After the war, I made certain connections." He began activating the pod systems. "It's unregistered, untraceable. It'll get you to the outer colonies where Walsh's influence doesn't reach." Vela's hand caught his arm, her touch surprisingly warm. "You said you, not us." Before Terran could respond, the station's emergency alert system blared to life. "Attention all personnel. Security lockdown in progress. All civilians must remain in designated areas. Repeat, security lockdown in progress." "They're moving faster than expected," Terran muttered, fingers flying over the pod's controls. He turned to Vela. "Someone needs to create a diversion, override the exterior airlock protocols." From the main terminal. Understanding dawned in Vela's luminous eyes. "You're not coming with us." Terran met her gaze steadily. "One of us has to stay behind to ensure the launch goes undetected. Launch the pod on my signal, you'll have about 3 minutes before security systems recalibrate." Leary stepped forward, her small hand reaching up to touch Terran's face. "You will die here," she said simply, not a question but a statement delivered with unsettling certainty. "Leary," Vela admonished, but the child continued to stare at Terran. "I see it," she whispered. "In the metals around you. They sing of endings." Terran knelt to meet her at eye level. Some endings are worth it, little one. He gently touched one of her bioluminescent markings. Your mother will keep you safe. You'll find a new home among the stars. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors. Time had run out. Terran quickly ushered them into the pod, showing Vela the navigation system. As the hatch began to close, Vela caught his hand. There is another way, she said urgently. Leary can sense the valuable elements in Walsh's private vessel, the ones he's collected through her research. If we could transmit that information to station authorities. Exposing his illegal mining operations, Terran finished, a new possibility taking shape. But how? We can't reach a secure terminal from here. Vela's markings pulsed with renewed intensity. We don't need to. She turned to Leary. Remember how we would sing to the stones at home? How they would answer with their own songs? Leary nodded solemnly. The station's communication array, Vela explained to Terran. It's composed of rare minerals from my world, minerals that respond to certain frequencies. Frequencies Leary can produce. Understanding dawned on Terran's face. This wasn't about running anymore. This was about standing their ground, about fighting back against those who would exploit others for profit and power. It was about creating something new from the broken pieces of their lives. With security forces closing in, they formulated a desperate plan, one that relied on Leary's unique abilities, Vela's technical knowledge, and Terran's intimate understanding of Nova Station systems. Hours later, as dawn broke across the artificial horizon of the station, 3 figures stood at a viewport watching as Gideon Walsh was escorted onto a security transport. The evidence against him, mysterious transmissions detailing his illegal mining operations, exploitation of indigenous resources, and falsified research, had been too overwhelming to ignore, even for officials initially in his pocket. What happens now? Leary asked, her small hand clasped in Terran's calloused one. Terran looked at Vela, seeing in her eyes the same cautious hope he felt stirring in his own heart. Now, he said, we build something new. In the days that followed, Nova Station witnessed a subtle shift in its operations. A new hydroponics specialist with blue skin introduced revolutionary cultivation techniques. A maintenance technician with haunted eyes began to smile again. And a child with gifts beyond understanding started attending the station's small school, where she taught her classmates about the songs of stones and stars. Where once there had been broken souls crying in the darkness, now there stood a family forged not by blood, but by choice, a testament to the power of compassion across the vast divides of space and species, a new beginning written in the language of stars.